The arena fell silent as Commander Taemin stepped onto the sand. Above him, Emperor Kwanho watched from his glass tower, his face showing no emotion. Around the arena, thousands of soldiers and nobles waited to see if this warrior would succeed where 12 others had failed. In the center of the arena stood the beast. They called it Stormfang. It was the largest Ravok ever captured, with scales that shimmered like black metal, and eyes that burned with intelligence and rage. The creature stood 15 feet tall at the shoulder, with claws that could tear through steel and jaws powerful enough to crush a transport vehicle. Taemin wore the traditional bonding armor, embedded with neural implants that would connect his mind to the beast. He had trained his entire life for this moment. He had bonded with 3 other Ravok before, each one becoming an extension of his will in battle. But Stormfang was different. Everyone knew it. The commander raised his hand in the ritual gesture. "I come to bond," he said in the ancient words. Stormfang's response was immediate and terrifying. The beast roared, a sound that shook the arena walls and made several spectators cover their ears. Then it charged. Taemin barely had time to activate his shield before 2 tons of muscle and fury slammed into him. He rolled, came up fighting, and tried to activate the neural connection. Nothing. The beast's mind was a wall of pure rage, impossible to penetrate. The fight lasted 3 minutes. Stormfang threw Taemin across the arena like a toy. Only the emergency tranquilizer team saved his life, firing enough sedatives to drop the beast before it could finish its attack. Medical teams rushed in to carry away the unconscious commander. Emperor Kwanho descended from his tower to the control room, where his advisors waited. General Yunseo, his chief military officer, shook her head. "Your Majesty, we must accept reality. This beast cannot be tamed. It has killed 2 warriors and injured 10 others. We should end this before more lives are lost." "No," Kwanho said firmly. "Stormfang represents power we desperately need. The Nethrak swarm grows stronger every day. We are losing colonies on the outer rim. I need every war beast we can field." "Then perhaps we should examine why this particular animal is so violent," said Castellan Bora, the oldest advisor. The capture teams reported nothing unusual. It was taken from the wild like all others. Kwanho stared through the glass at the sedated beast. Something about this situation felt wrong, but he could not identify what. "Contact the xenobiology experts. All of them. Someone must understand what makes this creature different." Halfway across the galaxy, on the human colony world called New Terrace, Hana knelt beside an injured Kravix pup. The small alien creature had been caught in crossfire during a border skirmish, its leg badly broken. Hana worked carefully, setting the bone while humming softly to keep the frightened animal calm. Her sanctuary was small, built from salvaged materials and funded by donations. She had 17 alien animals in her care, each one rescued from war zones or illegal trade. Humans were still new to the galactic community. Barely 50 years since first contact. Many other species viewed them as primitive or weak, but Hana had discovered something that gave her an edge in her work. Humans had an unusual talent for understanding animals, even alien ones. Her communication device chimed. She finished bandaging the Kravix pup before checking the message. Her eyes widened as she read. "An offer from the Valtherian Empire," she whispered. The Empire was one of the most powerful in the galaxy. They rarely acknowledged human expertise in anything. The message was brief. They had a behavioral problem with a war beast. They needed consultation. The payment offered was enough to fund her sanctuary for 5 years. Hana looked around at her animals. She thought about all the creatures she could save with that money, and she admitted to herself that she was curious. The Valtherians' war beasts were legendary, but information about them was classified. This was a chance to study one of the most impressive predators in known space. She sent her acceptance that same day. The journey to Apex Prime took a week aboard an Imperial transport. Hana was the only passenger, which made her feel small in the massive ship. The crew treated her with distant politeness, clearly wondering why their empire needed help from a human. When she arrived at the capital world, the city took her breath away. Crystal towers reached into the clouds, connected by bridges of light. Vehicles flew in perfect patterns through the air. Everything was efficient, orderly, and beautiful in a cold way. General Yunseo met her at the landing platform. The Valtherian woman was tall and elegant, with the bearing of someone who had commanded armies. She looked at Hana with barely concealed skepticism. "You are the expert?" Yunseo asked. Hana, who was short and dressed in practical field clothes, smiled. "I am. Where's the patient?" "Patient?" Yunseo's expression suggested she found the word choice strange. "The beast is in the containment arena. Follow me." They traveled through the palace complex in silence. Hana noticed the damage to several walls, the repair work being done on guard posts. Whatever this beast was, it had caused serious problems. The arena was enormous, built to hold creatures much larger than any earth animal. Yunseo led Hana to an observation room with armored glass overlooking the sand below. "There," Yunseo said, pointing. Hana looked down and saw Stormfang for the first time. The beast paced at the far end of the arena, moving with dangerous grace. Even from this distance, Hana could see the intelligence in its eyes and the tension in every muscle. "Tell me about the capture," Hana said, not taking her eyes off the creature. "Standard protocol." The beast was located on a wild planet. A team used nets and tranquilizers. It was transported here for bonding. "Show me the capture reports. All of them." "Video if you have it," Yunseo frowned. "That information is classified." Hana turned to face her. "Then I cannot help you. I need to understand this animal's history to understand its behavior." The general stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Wait here." An hour later, Hana sat in a small office reviewing files and video footage. She watched the capture team track Stormfang through rocky terrain. She saw them fire the nets and tranquilizer darts. She watched the beast fight even as the drugs took effect, roaring with what the soldiers interpreted as rage. But Hana heard something different in that sound. She played the audio again, adjusting the frequencies. Then again, her hands began to shake as understanding dawned. She pulled up the geographical data from the capture site. Rocky terrain, caves, the type of place where Ravok built dens. She cross-referenced with the breeding season for the species. The timing matched. "Oh no," she whispered. Hana ran back to the observation room where Yunseo waited. "Where was the beast when you found it?" "In a valley. It was alone." "Did your team search the area? Look for anything unusual?" "They secured the target and left." "Standard procedure." Hana pointed at Stormfang below. "That's not rage. That's not violence. That's desperation. This beast is a mother. You took her from her cubs. She's not trying to hurt your warriors. She's trying to get back to her babies." Yunseo's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "Cubs? The report said nothing about cubs. Because your team didn't look for them. They saw a dangerous predator and captured it. But Ravok are intelligent. They're not just animals. She's been trying to escape this entire time, and when warriors try to bond with her, she sees them as threats keeping her from her young." "The cubs would be dead by now," Yunseo said quietly. "It has been 6 months." "Maybe. But this mother doesn't know that. And until she does, she'll never stop fighting." Hana pressed her hands against the glass. "I need to go back to that planet. I need to search for those cubs." "Impossible. That world is now in contested space. The Nethrak swarm has moved into that sector. It would be suicide." Hana looked at the general. "If those cubs are alive, they're her only chance at peace. And if they're not, bringing back proof might at least give her closure. Either way, someone has to try." Yunseo studied the human for a long moment. "You would risk your life for an alien creature that would probably kill you as quickly as it would kill any of us?" "Yes," Hana said simply. "Because right now I might be the only one who understands what she's going through." That night, while the palace slept, Hana made her choice. She accessed the spaceport using her temporary credentials, found a small scout ship, and began the launch sequence. Alarms blared immediately, but by the time guards arrived, she was already lifting off. As she punched in coordinates for the Forbidden World, she sent a single message back to Emperor Quan Ho. "Some bonds cannot be forced. They can only be earned. I'm going to find her cubs. If I die trying, at least tell her I looked." Behind her in the palace, the Emperor read her message and made a decision that would change everything. He called for Lieutenant Dae Sung, his best pilot, and gave him orders to follow the human. Not to stop her, but to make sure she did not die alone in enemy territory. And in the arena below, Stormfang lifted her head as if sensing something had changed. The mother's heart, which had beaten with fury and fear for 6 long months, found something it had not felt in all that time. Hope. She fashioned a carrier from her emergency supplies, creating a secure pouch where both cubs could rest against her chest. They accepted it, exhausted and finally willing to trust. As Hana began the climb back to the surface, she felt their small hearts beating against her. But when she emerged from the cave, her scanner screamed a different warning. Multiple signals. Closing fast. Not cubs this time. Nethrak warriors. They appeared from all directions, at least a dozen of them. These were full-grown soldiers of the swarm, their exoskeletons gleaming in the moonlight, their weapon arms raised. They had detected her ship's landing and come to investigate. Hana ran. The cubs bounced against her chest, crying out in fear. She drew her plasma pistol and fired blindly behind her, not aiming, just trying to slow her pursuers. The weapon's recoil nearly knocked it from her hand. She could see her ship ahead, maybe 200 yards away. The Nethrak were faster, gaining ground. One leaped at her from the side and she barely dodged, rolling on the ground and protecting the cubs with her body. Then the sky erupted with light. Imperial fighters screamed overhead, their weapons tearing into the Nethrak formation. Hana looked up in shock as one fighter landed between her and her pursuers, its guns still firing. The pilot's voice came through her suit's communication system. "Human, get to your ship. Now," she ran. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of battle. More fighters descended, and Valtharian soldiers in combat armor dropped from transport beams. They formed a defensive line, holding back the Nethrak while Hana reached her ship. But her ship was damaged. A Nethrak weapon had punctured the hull and fuel was leaking. The engines were dead. Lieutenant Daesung landed his fighter beside her damaged vessel. His voice came through again. "Your ship is destroyed. Get on board with me, move!" Hana ran to his fighter, clutching the cubs. The rear compartment opened and she threw herself inside. Daesung took off immediately, pulling away from the planet's surface as more Nethrak emerged from underground hives. In the fighter's cramped rear section, Hana held the cubs close. They were terrified, crying and shaking. She whispered to them constantly, trying to keep them calm. Daesung's voice came through the internal speaker. "What are those sounds?" "The cubs," Hana gasped. "I found them. They're alive." There was silence for a moment. "You actually found them. I thought this was madness." "It was," Hana admitted. "But necessary madness." They cleared the atmosphere and began accelerating toward hyperspace jump coordinates. Behind them, Nethrak fighters launched in pursuit. Daesung's team formed up around his ship, creating a defensive formation. "We have a problem," Daesung said. "Your extra weight plus the cubs is affecting my ship's speed. We cannot outrun them to the jump point." Hana looked down at the cubs pressed against her. After everything they had survived, they could not die now. She could not let that happen. "Do what you have to do," she said. "Just get these babies home to their mother." Daesung made a decision. He called to his team. "Formation Delta, draw them off. I will get the human and cubs to safety." His pilots responded immediately, breaking away to engage the Nethrak fighters. It was a sacrifice, risking their lives to buy time. Daesung pushed his ship to maximum speed, the engine screaming with stress. Hana felt herself pressed back into the seat, her arms wrapped around the cubs. They were crying louder now, the sound cutting through her heart. "Almost there," Daesung said. 30 seconds to jump point." Behind them, the battle raged. One of Daesung's pilots was hit, his ship spinning away damaged but intact. Another was taking heavy fire but holding position. 20 seconds. Hana closed her eyes, holding the cubs tight. She thought about Stormfang, waiting in that arena, not knowing that help was coming, not knowing that her babies had survived. 10 seconds. The cubs' cries changed pitch. They were making a sound Hana had never heard before, something between a call and a song. It was hauntingly beautiful and heartbreaking. "Jump," Daesung said. Reality twisted around them as they entered hyperspace. The Nethrak fighters disappeared. The battle vanished. They were safe. In the sudden silence, broken only by the hum of engines and the soft crying of cubs, Hana began to shake with released tension. She had done it. Against all logic and reason, she had found them. "Thank you," she whispered to Daesung. "You saved us." "You are insane," he replied, but there was something like respect in his voice. "Completely insane. But that was the bravest thing I have witnessed in 10 years of service." The cubs had quieted, exhausted and finally safe. They slept against Hana, their breathing slow and steady, and somewhere ahead across the light years they would soon cross, a mother waited. Stormfang would soon learn that miracles were real, and sometimes they arrived in the arms of a small human who refused to give up hope. The medical bay was too bright. Hana woke slowly, her body aching in places she did not know could hurt. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory returned in a rush and she tried to sit up. "The cubs," she gasped. Gentle hands pushed her back down. A Valtherian medical officer stood beside her bed, her expression calm. "The cubs are safe. They are being cared for in a secure habitat. You have been unconscious for 6 hours." Hana relaxed slightly. "I need to see them. You need to rest. Your body has been through significant stress. You have bruised ribs, dehydration, and minor chemical burns from exposure to the Nethrak atmosphere." But Hana was already pulling the medical sensors from her arms. "Where are my clothes?" The officer sighed, recognizing that arguing was pointless. "Lieutenant Dae-sung left these for you. He said you would refuse to rest." She held up clean clothes. "The cubs are in Habitat 7, but you cannot enter without authorization." Hana dressed quickly, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "Then get me authorization." 20 minutes later, she stood outside a large observation window looking into a habitat designed for juvenile ravak. The cubs, now cleaned and fed, were curled together in a pile of soft bedding. They looked healthier already, though still too thin. Dae-sung appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of something hot. He offered her one. "Thermal tea. It helps with pain." Hana accepted it gratefully. "Thank you. For everything. I would be dead without you." "Yes," he agreed simply. "You would be. That was the most foolish rescue I have ever witnessed." He paused. "Also the most successful. The vets say the cubs will make a full recovery. Another week and they would have died." They stood in silence for a moment watching the sleeping cubs. Then Hana asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she woke. "Where is Stormfang?" "In her arena." But something has changed. About 3 hours ago she stopped pacing. She sat down and has not moved since. The handlers say she is acting strange. Hana understood immediately. She knows. Somehow she knows her cubs are here. Dae-sung looked at her skeptically. "That is impossible. They are in different buildings, separated by walls and distance. Ravak can sense their young across vast distances. It's a form of telepathic connection, not strong enough for complex communication, but enough to know if their cubs are alive or dead." Hana turned to face him. She has been carrying the fear that they were dead for 6 months. Now that fear is gone. She can feel them. "If that is true," Dae-sung said slowly, "then we should inform the Emperor." Emperor Kwan-ho convened an emergency meeting within the hour. Hana stood before him and his full council, still wearing borrowed clothes and moving stiffly from her injuries. She explained what she believed was happening. Castellan Bora was the first to object. "This is speculation based on feelings, not facts. We cannot make decisions about our most dangerous war beast because a human thinks she understands animal telepathy." But General Yoon Seo spoke up. "The human was correct about the cubs. She found them when our own team said it was impossible. Perhaps we should listen to her now." Kwan-ho studied Hana carefully. "What do you propose?" "Let me bring the cubs to Stormfang. Let them reunite." The room erupted in protests. It was dangerous, unprecedented, against all protocols. But Kwan-ho raised his hand for silence. "If we do this and you are wrong, the beast will kill you and possibly the cubs." "I'm not wrong," Hana said firmly. "And if you are right? If the reunion succeeds, Stormfang will still be unbonded. We will have an even more protective mother with her cubs." "How does that help the Empire?" Hana took a breath. "It helps because a mother who has her cubs back is not a mother consumed by rage and fear. She will be calmer, more rational, and she will remember who brought her cubs home." Kwan-ho was silent for a long moment. Then he made his decision. "Prepare the arena. We will do this at dawn tomorrow. That gives us time to set up emergency protocols." That night, Hana could not sleep. She visited the cubs again, sitting outside their habitat. They pressed against the glass when they saw her, recognizing her scent. She placed her hand against the glass and they touched it with their small paws. "Tomorrow you see your mother," she told them. "I hope I'm right about this. I really hope I'm right. Dae-sung found her there near midnight. You should rest. Can't, too nervous." She looked at him. "Why are you here?" "To make sure you do not run away." He said it with a slight smile. "Also because I cannot sleep either. What you are attempting tomorrow is either brilliant or suicidal. Why can't it be both?" He laughed quietly. "It can. Most brilliant things are also somewhat suicidal." He sat down beside her. "Tell me about your world." About Earth, they talked for hours. Hana told him about blue oceans and green forests, about animals that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Daesung shared stories of his military service, the battles he had fought and the friends he had lost. By the time the first light of dawn appeared, they had formed the beginning of a real friendship. The arena filled with spectators at sunrise. This was unprecedented, an event that would be remembered in imperial history. Emperor Quanho sat in his observation tower. General Yunseo commanded the emergency response teams. Medical units stood ready. Hana entered through the small personnel door, carrying the cubs in a special carrier against her chest. They were awake and alert, their heads poking out to look around at the enormous space. At the far end of the arena, separated by energy barriers, Stormfang waited. The massive war beast stood perfectly still watching, her eyes locked onto Hana and the cubs. "Release the barriers," Quanho commanded. The energy fields dropped away with a crackling sound. Nothing separated Hana from the beast now except 200 feet of sand. Hana began walking forward. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to move steadily, calmly. Stormfang took a step forward, then another. The beast's movements were careful, controlled. Her nostrils flared, taking in the scent that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. They met in the center of the arena. Hana stopped walking. She stood perfectly still as Stormfang's massive head lowered to her level. The beast could swallow her whole. Those jaws had killed trained warriors, but when Stormfang inhaled, taking in the scent of her cubs, the sound she made was not a roar. It was something between a whimper and a song, a sound of pure relief and joy. The cubs cried back, struggling in the carrier. Hana opened it with shaking hands, and the cubs tumbled out onto the sand. For a moment they stood uncertain, looking up at the massive creature that was their mother. Then instinct took over. They ran to her, crying out in high-pitched calls. Stormfang lowered herself to the ground, and the cubs climbed onto her, burrowing into her fur, pressing against her scales. The mother wrapped herself around them, making soft rumbling sounds that Hana could feel in her bones. The reunion was so raw, so emotional, that many watching felt tears on their faces. This was not a monster. This was a mother who had lost everything and now had it returned. Hana stepped back, giving them space. She had done what she came to do. The cubs were home. But then Stormfang lifted her head and looked at Hana. The beast's eyes were filled with intelligence and something else. Gratitude, understanding, recognition. Slowly, with movements that seemed almost ceremonial, Stormfang rose to her feet. The cubs clung to her back as she walked toward Hana. The human wanted to step back but forced herself to stand firm. Stormfang stopped in front of her. Then, in a gesture that made the entire arena gasp, the great war beast lowered her head until her forehead touched the sand at Hana's feet. It was a gesture of submission, of respect, of bond. "Oh," Hana whispered. Her hand moved without conscious thought, reaching out to touch the scales on Stormfang's head. The beast rumbled deep in her chest, a sound of contentment. In the observation tower, Emperor Quanho stood. Did that just happen? General Yunseo was staring at her instruments. The readings are clear. The beast is showing all the neural patterns of a bonded war beast, but there are no implants. No technology. The human has no way to control her mind. She does not need to control her mind, Quanho said quietly. She earned her loyalty. That is a far stronger bond than any technology could create. But Castellan Bora was not pleased. "This creates a crisis, Your Majesty. War beasts are symbols of Valtherian power. How can we allow a human to ride one? What message does that send?" Before Quanho could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. A young officer ran into the observation room, his face pale. "Your Majesty, the Nethrak swarm has launched a major offensive. They have attacked 3 colonies simultaneously. They are coming for Apex Prime." The room fell silent. Quanho's expression hardened. "How long until they arrive?" 72 hours, Your Majesty." Quanho looked down at the arena where Hana stood with her hand on Stormfang's head, the cubs playing around their feet. He thought about traditions and power, and what it meant to lead. Then Commander Taimin, recovered from his injuries, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I request permission to speak." "Granted." Taimin looked at the scene below. That beast nearly killed me. She broke my bones and would have torn me apart if not for the tranquilizer team. But I understand now. I was trying to dominate her. I was trying to force a bond that could never exist. He paused. The human did not try to dominate. She gave the beast what she needed most. That is a kind of strength I never considered. He turned to face the Emperor. We need every rider we can field, every war beast. If Stormfang will fight with the human, then we should be grateful, not proud. General Yunseo nodded agreement. The commander is right. In 72 hours, tradition will not save us. Only strength will. And that beast below, with that human, represents strength we desperately need. Emperor Quan Ho made his decision. Bring the human to me. Minutes later, Hana stood before the Emperor, still dusty from the arena, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. Quan Ho studied her carefully. Can you fight? He asked directly. Hana wanted to say yes to appear brave, but she was honest instead. I don't know. I'm not a soldier. I'm a scientist who takes care of animals. Can you ride? I can ride. And Stormfang will fight to protect her cubs, to protect me. The cubs cannot go into battle. Then we make armor for them. Special compartments where they can stay safe but stay with their mother. Separating them now would destroy everything we just built. Quan Ho considered this. It was unusual, impractical, and went against every military doctrine. But the universe was changing, and those who could not change with it would not survive. You have 72 hours to train, he said. Lieutenant Dae Sung will be your instructor. After that, you ride with the War Beast Cavalry against the Nethrak Swarm. If you succeed, I will grant Stormfang and her cubs permanent protection. No more forced bondings, no more breeding programs, they will be free. Hana felt tears on her face. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. You may die in 3 days. We all may die. He looked past her to where Stormfang waited in the arena with her cubs. But if we do die, at least that mother got to hold her children one more time. Sometimes that is the only victory we can claim. Hana returned to the arena. Stormfang rumbled in greeting, and the cubs tumbled over each other trying to reach her. She sat down in the sand, and they climbed into her lap like they had known her forever. Above, the sun rose over Apex Prime, and in the distance, war was coming. But for this one moment, in this one place, a broken family was whole again, and that was worth fighting for. The training hall was built for warriors. Hana felt small and out of place among the weapons and armor. Lieutenant Dae Sung stood waiting for her, along with 3 other instructors. Their faces showed doubt mixed with curiosity. 72 hours, Dae Sung said without greeting. That is not enough time to make you a warrior, but it might be enough to keep you alive. He gestured to the equipment around them. First, armor. The Valtherian combat armor was beautiful and terrifying. Black metal with energy shields, built-in weapon systems, and a helmet that provided full sensory data. Hana struggled into it with help, the weight making her stumble. It will feel natural once you are bonded with Stormfang, one instructor explained. The Ravok's strength becomes your strength. Their reflexes enhance yours. But that works through neural implants, Hana said. I don't have those. The instructors exchanged glances. No one knew how Hana's bond would work in actual combat. They were entering unknown territory. For 3 days and nights, Hana trained. She learned to hold weapons without dropping them. She practiced mounting and dismounting from a mechanical Ravok. She studied battlefield tactics and emergency protocols. Most importantly, she spent hours with Stormfang, learning to understand the beast's movements and intentions. The cubs, now named Ash and Ember by the palace children who watched them, stayed close. Engineers worked day and night to create special armored compartments that would attach to Stormfang's sides, protecting the cubs while keeping them close to their mother. On the second day, Dae Sung took Hana to the practice range. Show me you can shoot. Hana fired the plasma rifle at targets. She hit some. She missed many. Dae Sung's expression remained neutral, but she could tell he was concerned. In real battle, you will not have time to aim carefully. You must trust your instinct and shoot fast. I'm trying. Try harder. The Nethrak do not give second chances. That night, exhausted and bruised, Hana sat in the arena with Stormfang. The great beast lay on her side while the cubs played around her. Hana leaned against Stormfang's warm flank, feeling the steady breathing. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Everyone is counting on me, and I'm just a person who takes care of animals. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Stormfang turned her massive head and gazed at Hana with intelligent eyes. The beast made a low rumbling sound, almost like words in a language Hana could not speak but somehow understood. You saved my children. You are braver than you know. I hope you're right, Hana said, because tomorrow we find out. The Nethrak fleet arrived exactly on schedule, emerging from hyperspace like a swarm of insects. Thousands of bioships, each one grown rather than built, each carrying hundreds of warriors. They moved with hive coordination, surrounding Apex Prime's orbital defense stations. The palace command center erupted with activity. Emperor Quanho stood at the tactical display, watching the enemy approach. General Yunseo coordinated defenses and Commander Taemin prepared the war beast cavalry. All riders to launch positions, Taemin commanded. In the cavalry bay, 53 riders mounted their Ravok. These were the Empire's elite, warriors who had bonded with their beasts and trained for years. They wore black armor that gleamed in the launch lights, and their weapons were charged and ready. Hana arrived last, leading Stormfang. The great beast wore custom armor that had been fitted around the protected compartments holding Ash and Ember. The cubs were secured but could see out through transparent panels, their eyes wide with excitement and fear. The other riders stared, some with respect, others with skepticism. One older rider, a woman named Sumi, approached. Human, she said formally. My beast and I will fly on your right wing. If you fall, we will try to catch you. It was an offer of protection and partnership. Hana bowed in the Valtharian manner. Thank you. Commander Taemin walked the line of riders, speaking briefly with each. When he reached Hana, he stopped and studied her carefully. I tried to bond with your beast. She nearly killed me for my arrogance. He paused. You succeeded where I failed by showing humility and compassion. I did not understand those qualities could be strengths. I do now. He placed his fist over his heart in salute. Fly well, Hana of Earth. The words were simple, but coming from him, they meant everything. Hana returned the salute, her hand shaking inside her armor. All riders, mount, Taemin commanded. Hana climbed onto Stormfang's back, settling into the riding position she had practiced 100 times. The beast stood, and suddenly Hana was 15 feet in the air, swaying with Stormfang's movements. The cubs chirped from their compartments, and Stormfang rumbled in response. The launch bay doors opened, revealing the stars and the approaching enemy fleet. Hana's stomach dropped. The Nethrak swarm looked endless, a moving shadow that blotted out the light. Cavalry, launch! Stormfang leaped into space, and Hana's world became motion and terror. The transition from atmosphere to vacuum made her dizzy. The Ravok could survive in space through biology humans did not fully understand. Using fields that protected both beast and rider, the cavalry formation spread across the void, 53 riders on their war beasts, flying toward an enemy that outnumbered them 100 to 1. Remember your training. Daesung's voice came through her helmet communicator. He was flying nearby in a support fighter. Trust Stormfang. She knows how to fight. The Nethrak fighters came at them like a wave. Hana barely had time to register their approach before battle was joined. Plasma fire lit up the space around her. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. Ravok roared and dove and fought. Stormfang moved with terrifying grace. The beast twisted through enemy fire, claws tearing through Nethrak fighters, energy breath melting through their bio-armor. Hana held on desperately, firing her weapons when she could, but mostly just trying not to fall. A Nethrak fighter came at them from the side. Hana saw it too late, but Stormfang sensed it, twisting in a maneuver that should have thrown Hana off. The rider's instinct took over, and Hana moved with the beast instead of against it. Her shot caught the enemy fighter in its central mass. Good kill, Sumi's voice came through the communicator. But there was no time to celebrate. More enemies swarmed around them. Hana watched in horror as one of the riders took a direct hit, both warrior and Ravok spinning away damaged. Another rider's beast was caught in crossfire, wounded but still fighting. This was worse than anything Hana had imagined. This was not a battle. This was chaos and death and fear. Hana, Daesung's voice was urgent. Pattern analysis shows the enemy coordination has a weak point. Sector 7-3. If we hit it, we can disrupt their formation. Hana looked at her display, trying to understand through the confusion. Sector 7-3 was deep in enemy territory, protected by dozens of fighters. That's suicide, another writer protested over the communication channel. All military action is suicide until someone survives it, Taemin said grimly. Human, can your beast make that run? Hana looked down at Stormfang's armored head. The cubs were chirping frantically from their compartments, sensing danger. Every instinct told her to retreat, to seek safety. But she thought about the colony worlds already destroyed. She thought about the families hiding in shelters below while their world was under attack. She thought about ash and ember growing up in a galaxy consumed by war. We can make it, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I need volunteers, Taemin commanded. 12 riders responded immediately, including Sumi. Daesung's fighter moved into formation. I'm with you. They formed a spear formation and dove toward Sector 7-3. The Nethrak responded instantly, shifting fighters to block them. The space between the cavalry and their target filled with enemy ships. Ignore everything else, Taemin commanded. Focus on the target. They flew into hell. Plasma fire came from every direction. One of the volunteer riders took a hit and fell away. Another's Ravok was wounded but kept flying. Hana fired continuously, not aiming, just filling space with energy. Stormfang roared. A sound that carried even through vacuum, transmitted through their bond. The beast's fury and determination filled Hana, pushing away fear. They were not just rider and mount. They were partners. They were family. A Nethrak command ship loomed ahead, larger than the fighters, covered in biological weapons. This was their target. Hana pulled explosives from her equipment harness, the charges Daesung had given her during training. Stormfang, I need to get close. Really close. The beast understood. She folded her wings and dove straight at the command ship. Enemy fire tore through the space around them. Something hit Stormfang's side and the beast shrieked in pain. The cubs cried out in response. But Stormfang did not stop. She slammed into the command ship's hull, her claws digging into the organic armor. Hana leaned out, placing the explosives on what her sensors identified as the ship's central nerve cluster. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the charges. Charges set, she shouted. Go, go, go! Stormfang pushed away from the ship, flying as fast as her wounded body could manage. Behind them, other riders provided covering fire. Daesung's fighter swooped in, drawing enemy attention. Detonate in 3, Hana said, her thumb over the trigger. 2, 1. The explosion was massive. The command ship broke apart, and suddenly the coordination of thousands of Nethrak fighters became chaos. They scattered, losing their formation, attacking randomly instead of as a unified force. All units, press the advantage. General Yoon Seo's voice came through every communicator. They have lost coordination. Strike now! The Valtherian forces surged forward. The battle turned. But Hana barely noticed. Stormfang was falling, wounded and exhausted. They tumbled through space, spinning. Hana! Daesung's voice was panicked. Your trajectory is wrong. You will hit the atmosphere too fast. Hana tried to help Stormfang stabilize, but the beast's wings were not responding correctly. They entered atmosphere at a steep angle, friction heating their armor. The cubs were screaming now, terrified. Hana held on with everything she had. I'm sorry, she whispered to Stormfang. I'm so sorry I brought you into this. But Stormfang was not giving up. With the last of her strength, the beast spread her damaged wings, catching air, slowing their fall just enough. They crashed into the palace gardens, tearing through trees and stone, finally sliding to a stop in a fountain that exploded into steam around them. Hana's vision went dark. She heard voices shouting, felt hands pulling her from Stormfang's back. Someone was crying. She hoped it was not her. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness took her was the sound of cubs crying for their mother, and Stormfang's weak rumble in response, promising she was still there, still fighting, still protecting them. Then darkness came, and with it dreams of falling through an endless sky. Pain brought Hana back to consciousness. Every part of her body hurt in different ways. She opened her eyes slowly, seeing the familiar ceiling of the medical bay. How many times had she woken here now? She had lost count. Daesung sat in a chair beside her bed, his head resting against the wall, eyes closed. He looked exhausted. As if sensing her awareness, his eyes opened. You're awake, he said quietly. How long? 8 hours since the crash. The battle is over. We won. He paused. You won. Your strike broke their command structure. The Empire survives because of what you did. Hana tried to sit up and pain shot through her ribs. The cubs. Where are Ash and Ember? Daesung's expression changed, becoming careful. They are with Stormfang. Hana, you need to prepare yourself. The healers are doing everything possible. But Stormfang's injuries are severe. Hana was moving before he finished speaking, pulling medical sensors from her arms, ignoring the protests of the monitoring equipment. Daesung tried to stop her, but she pushed past him. Where is she? He knew better than to argue. The Imperial Beast Hospital. Building 7. Hana ran, still wearing the medical gown, her bare feet slapping against cold floors. Palace guards saw her coming and stepped aside, recognizing the human who had saved their world. She burst through the hospital doors and followed the sound of crying cubs. The room was enormous, designed for the largest war beasts. Stormfang lay in the center, surrounded by medical equipment that beeped and hummed. Her breathing was labored, each breath a struggle. Ash and Ember were pressed against their mother's side, making soft distress sounds. Chief Healer So Jin stood nearby, monitoring displays. She turned when Hana entered. Human, you should be in bed. Tell me, Hana demanded. Tell me everything. So Jin's expression was professional but compassionate. Multiple injuries. Damaged wing structure, cracked ribs, internal trauma. The crash should have killed her. She survived through will alone. The healer paused. We can save her life. But she will never fly again. Never fight. She will be retired. Hana walked slowly to Stormfang's side. When the great beast saw her, she lifted her head slightly and made a sound between a rumble and a sigh. One massive eye focused on Hana, and in that eye was understanding. They had survived together. I'm here, Hana whispered, placing her hand on Stormfang's scarred scales. I'm not leaving. She stayed there for 3 days. The palace staff brought her food and clean clothes, but she refused to leave. She slept on the floor beside Stormfang, waking whenever the beast's breathing changed. The cubs stayed with her, seeking comfort from the small human who had brought them home. On the 3rd day, Emperor Quan Ho came to visit. He stood for a long time, watching Hana tend to the injured war beast. My advisors are drafting honors, he said finally. Medals, titles, rewards. You saved my empire. What do you want? Hana did not look up from checking Stormfang's bandages. I want her to be safe. I want the cubs to grow up without fear. No more forced bondings. No more breeding programs. Let them choose their own lives. Done, Quan Ho said simply. The program is already being reformed. We are creating new protocols based on what we learned from you. Good. The Emperor smiled slightly. You do not ask for wealth or power. You only ask for the safety of creatures most would view as weapons. They're not weapons. They're people in a different form. They think and feel and love their children. We forgot that. Yes, Quan Ho agreed. We did, but you reminded us. He paused. There is a political matter we must discuss. High Castellan Bora and others are unhappy that a human achieved what our finest warriors could not. They want you quietly rewarded and dismissed. Hana finally looked at him. I don't care about politics, I know. But politics care about you. That is why I am creating a new position, Director of War Beast Welfare Initiative. You would reform our entire program. Teach our riders to see their beasts as partners instead of tools. The position comes with full authority and substantial funding. That would mean staying here. I have a sanctuary on New Terrace. Yes. I am asking you to leave your home to help change ours. Hana looked at Stormfang, at the cubs sleeping against their mother's side. She thought about all the other war beasts who might be mothers torn from their children, warriors forced into bonds they did not choose. I'll do it, she said. On one condition. Lieutenant Daesung becomes tactical instructor. He understands what I'm trying to do. He has already volunteered, Quan Ho said with amusement. I believe you have made quite an impression on him. After the Emperor left, Daesung appeared with food and tea. He sat down beside Hana on the floor, both of them leaning against Stormfang's warm side. The Emperor offered me a promotion, general rank. That's wonderful. I told him I would refuse it. Hana looked at him in surprise. Why? Because being a general means politics and administration. I would rather teach at your new academy. I would rather help you change how we treat these magnificent creatures. He paused. And I would rather stay near you. Hana felt her face warm. Daesung, you do not have to respond now. I only wanted you to know. You changed how I see the universe. You showed me that strength comes in forms I never recognized. I admire that. I admire you. Before Hana could find words, Stormfang rumbled beneath them. The sound was almost like laughter. Weeks passed. Stormfang slowly healed. Though the healers were right about her flying, her wings would never carry her into space again. But she could walk, could move, could be with her cubs. That was enough. Ash and Ember grew rapidly. They were adolescents now, full of energy and curiosity. Unlike other Ravok raised in captivity, they showed no fear of different species. They had been raised with love instead of dominance, and it showed in every aspect of their behavior. Hana's academy opened 3 months after the battle. The facility was built on the palace grounds, designed with the welfare of beasts and riders equally considered. The first class had 20 students from 7 different species, including 3 humans. On opening day, Hana stood before them, with Daesung at her side and Stormfang resting nearby. "You are not here to master these creatures," she told the students. "You are here to earn their trust. That is the only bond that matters. That is the only bond that lasts." The training was different from traditional methods. Students learned animal psychology before combat tactics. They studied communication before weapons. They spent weeks just observing Ravok behavior, learning to understand instead of command. Some traditionalists mocked the approach. But then the first graduating class completed their bonding ceremonies, and the results spoke louder than criticism. The bonds formed were stronger than neural implants could create. The partnerships that developed were true collaborations. Rider Jiwoo, a young Valtharian woman, bonded with one of Ember's first cubs. Watching them together, moving in perfect harmony, even the skeptics had to admit something remarkable was happening. 6 months after the academy opened, the Nethrak launched another attack. This time it was a probing strike on a frontier colony. The new academy riders deployed alongside traditional cavalry. Hana watched from the command center as the battle unfolded. The academy riders showed creativity and adaptation that surprised everyone. They took risks no neural-linked rider would take because they trusted their beasts to protect them. That trust was returned. When Jiwoo's squadron saved an entire civilian transport fleet through unconventional tactics, even High Castellan Bora admitted the academy had value. That evening, Daesung found Hana in the gardens where Stormfang rested. The old war beast spent most of her time here now, watching her cubs and grandcubs play. She was content in retirement. "Good news," Daesung said. "The Emperor is expanding the academy. He wants facilities in 3 more systems." Hana smiled. "That's wonderful." "There is other news. Personal news." He sat down beside her. "I have been offered command of the expansion project. It would mean traveling to other worlds, being away from Apex Prime for extended periods." Hana felt a strange disappointment. Over the months, she and Daesung had grown close. She looked forward to seeing him every day, to their conversations and shared work. "That's a great opportunity," she managed to say. "I told them I would only accept if you came with me. As my partner in the project," he paused, "and perhaps as my partner in life if you would consider that." Hana looked at him in surprise. Daesung, always so formal and controlled, looked nervous. "I know humans and Valtharians do not often form such bonds," he continued. "But you have taught me that the most meaningful connections happen when we see past what is expected and recognize what is real." Hana thought about Earth, about the life she had left behind. She thought about the sanctuary she had built and the dream she had abandoned. But she also thought about what she had found here. Purpose. Change. A chance to reshape how an entire civilization treated other beings. And yes, she thought about Daesung, about his steady presence, his willingness to learn, his transformation from skeptical warrior to passionate advocate for change. "Yes," she said simply. They sat together as the sun set over Apex Prime, and Stormfang rumbled her approval. Years passed. The Nethrak War continued, but the nature of conflict was changing. The academy method spread to other civilizations. War beasts were no longer seen as weapons, but as partners. The bond between species deepened, and the galaxy was better for it. Hana and Daesung traveled together, opening new academies, training new riders. They formed a partnership in work and life that became legendary. Their children, when they came, grew up surrounded by Ravok and learned that family could take many forms. Stormfang lived to an old age for her species. She spent her final years in the palace gardens, surrounded by her descendants. 3 generations of cubs and grandcubs carried her legacy. When she finally passed, it was peacefully, with Hana's hand resting on her scales. At Stormfang's memorial, attended by riders from across the galaxy, Emperor Quan Ho spoke. He was old now, his hair white, but his voice was still strong. This beast was the most dangerous we ever captured. She killed and injured our warriors. We thought her untamable. We were wrong. She was not untamable. She was a mother separated from her children, and we were too blind to see it. He gestured to where Hana stood, also older now, her hair streaked with gray. A human showed us what we had forgotten, that true strength is not dominance. It is understanding. It is compassion. It is standing beside those who need you regardless of cost. The galaxy remembered that lesson. In academies across hundreds of worlds, instructors still told new students about the day a human walked into an arena carrying 2 cubs. They told how she tamed the untamable, not through force or technology, but through the simple act of bringing a mother back to her children. Hana retired eventually, but her work continued. The academies flourished. The bond between riders and beasts grew stronger with each generation. Wars still happened, but they were fought by partners who trusted each other, and that made all the difference. On her final visit to Apex Prime before returning to Earth, Hana walked through the gardens where Stormfang had spent her last years. Ash and Ember were there, now elderly themselves, resting in the sun while their grand cubs played nearby. They recognized her immediately, rumbling in greeting. She sat with them, and they pressed close like they had when they were small enough to fit in her arms. "Your mother was magnificent," Hana told them. "She taught the galaxy that mothers will do anything for their children. That love is the strongest force in the universe." The cubs rumbled in response, understanding in their own way. As Hana prepared to board the ship that would take her home to Earth, she looked back at Apex Prime one last time. The city gleamed in the sunlight, beautiful and strong, but its true strength was not in its weapons or armies. It was in the lesson they had learned. Every being, regardless of form, deserves respect. Every mother deserves her children. And sometimes the most revolutionary act is simple kindness. The galaxy was better because one small human had refused to accept that bonds must be forced. She had shown them bonds could be earned through compassion. That lesson would echo through the stars for generations to come. And in academies across the cosmos, when new riders asked their instructors how to bond with their beasts, the answer was always the same. You do not dominate them. You do not control them. You see them as they truly are. You earn their trust, and if you are very lucky, you earn their love. That was the legacy of Stormfang and Hana. That was the lesson that changed the galaxy. And it all began with one human carrying 2 cubs walking into an arena and proving that the gentlest hearts can change the universe. The stolen scout ship was fast, but not fast enough. Within minutes of leaving Apex Prime's atmosphere, Hana's sensors screamed warnings. 3 Imperial fighters were closing in, their weapon systems locked onto her ship. Her hands moved quickly over the controls. She had studied stellar navigation, but flying was different from reading charts. The fighters were gaining. She looked at the navigation display, searching for anything that might help. There, a gravitational anomaly near a dead moon. It was marked as dangerous, a place where ships could be crushed if they got too close. But Hana had learned about gravity wells in her xenobiology training. She understood how massive objects pulled at smaller ones, creating currents in space like rivers in an ocean. She angled her ship toward the anomaly. The pursuing fighters hesitated, then followed. Hana pushed her ship closer to the dangerous zone, feeling the pull of gravity increase. Her ship groaned with stress. Behind her, one of the fighters pulled back, unwilling to risk the approach, but 2 remained. Their pilots were skilled and determined. Hana waited until the last possible moment, then used the gravity to slingshot her ship around the moon. The maneuver was rough and left her dizzy, but when she checked her sensors, she was alone. The fighters had lost her in the gravity currents. She set course for the Forbidden World and activated the ship's medical system to stop her hands from shaking. On Apex Prime, General Yunseo stood before Emperor Quan Ho, her face carefully neutral as she reported the humans' escape. The Emperor listened in silence, then surprised everyone in the room with his response. "Send Lieutenant Dae Sung with a strike team. Tell him to shadow the human but not interfere unless absolutely necessary." Castellan Bora stepped forward. "Your Majesty, why waste resources on this? Let the human discover her mistake in enemy territory." Quan Ho turned to face his advisor. "Because if she succeeds, we gain the most powerful war beast in the Empire. And if she fails, we at least show that we tried to save her." Either outcome has value. He gestured to Yunseo. Send Di-sung now. Lieutenant Dae-sung received his orders while preparing his fighter for a routine patrol. He read them twice, certain there was a mistake. Follow a human into Nethrak territory. Protect her, but do not interfere. It made no sense, but orders were orders. He assembled a small team of 5 pilots, all volunteers who trusted his judgment. They launched within the hour, following the path Hana had taken through the gravity well. Sir, one of his pilots said over the communication channel, what exactly is this human trying to do? Dae-sung checked his navigation data. The Forbidden World was marked in red on every map. She is trying to rescue cubs. Baby Revok. There was silence on the channel. Then another pilot spoke. That is either the bravest or the most foolish thing I have ever heard. Perhaps both, Dae-sung said quietly. Stay sharp. We enter Nethrak space in 2 hours. The world below was dying. Hana could see it from orbit. Where the capture reports had shown green forests and blue water, now there were gray patches spreading like infection. The Nethrak were terraforming the planet to suit their biology, pumping chemicals into the air and water that would kill most other life forms. She landed her ship in the same valley where the capture had occurred. The coordinates matched the video footage exactly, but 6 months had changed everything. The vegetation was withered and brown. The air smelled wrong even through her environmental suit. Hana checked her weapons, a small plasma pistol she barely knew how to use, and grabbed her tracking equipment. The genetic scanner could detect Ravok DNA within a mile radius. She activated it and began walking toward the caves she had identified from the capture reports. The landscape was scarred. She found the blast marks where tranquilizer grenades had exploded. She found torn nets still tangled in rocks, and she found claw marks on stone, deep gouges where Stormfang had fought her captors. Hana placed her hand over one of the marks, feeling the desperation frozen in stone. I'm here, she said softly. I'm looking. Her scanner showed nothing. She moved deeper into the valley, checking every cave entrance, every sheltered spot where cubs might hide. Hours passed. The sun began to set, painting the poisoned sky in shades of purple and red. Then she heard them. Clicking sounds echoed across the valley. Nethrak scouts. Hana ducked behind a rock formation as 3 insectoid creatures scuttled into view. They were smaller than adult Nethrak warriors, but still deadly, with sharp limbs and sensor organs that swept the area. They were searching for something. Her heart pounded. She waited, perfectly still as they passed within 20 feet of her position. The creatures communicated in rapid clicks and buzzes. Then they moved on, heading toward the northern end of the valley. Hana waited 5 full minutes before moving again. She had to be more careful. The Nethrak controlled this world now. She continued her search, moving from shadow to shadow as darkness fell. Her scanner still showed nothing. Doubt began to creep into her mind. 6 months was a long time for cubs to survive alone. Maybe they had died of starvation. Maybe predators had found them. Maybe this entire journey was for nothing. She stopped to rest near a cave entrance, drinking from her water supply and trying to ignore the fear growing in her chest. That was when her scanner finally beeped. Weak signal. Very weak, but it was there. Ravok DNA. Juvenile genetic markers coming from deep inside the cave system ahead. Hana moved quickly now, following the signal. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. She activated her headlamp and descended into darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, going deeper underground. Her scanner signal grew stronger.
She called out softly, "Hello?"
I'm here to help. I'm a friend. 2 small shapes moved in the shadows ahead. Hana froze, letting her light illuminate them slowly. Cubs. 2 Ravok cubs, each one about the size of a large dog. Their scales were dull from malnutrition, and their eyes reflected her light with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Oh, Hana breathed. You're alive. You actually survived. She sat down slowly, making herself small and non-threatening. She pulled food from her pack, the high-protein rations from her ship. She tossed a piece toward the cubs and waited. The bolder cub crept forward, sniffed the food, then snatched it and retreated. The second cub watched, then did the same. They ate like they were starving, which they probably were. Hana spent the next 2 hours gaining their trust. She spoke to them constantly, her voice soft and gentle. She shared her food. She showed them she was not a threat. Finally, the first cub approached close enough to touch. Your mother is looking for you, Hana whispered as the cub sniffed her hand. She never stopped. She fought so hard to get back to you. The second cub approached more slowly, and soon both were pressing against her, seeking warmth and comfort. Hana felt tears on her face as she wrapped them in thermal blankets from her pack. We're going home, she told them. I'm taking you back to her,